Of course, my first talk was on 6 C's for effective teaching. I thank IUC for giving me this opportunity to present my talk at the second talk on RISE, the Pillars of Quality Assessment. The 21st century has commenced with high expectations, not just for student outcomes, but also for the professionalism of teachers and authorities, of clarity of purpose, approach and language, of recognition of different theoretical framings of assessments, and not least of an overall care for the educational opportunities for all the students. So today, hundreds of colleges and universities are doing assessment at the classroom, program and institutional levels, of course at various levels. The practice has become a universal expectation for the accreditation purposes and a frequent object of the state mandate. We can say 9 out of 10 institutions now report that they have some type of assessment activity underway. Along the way, we say that a wisdom of practice has emerged. Now, first let's define the term assessment. What is assessment actually? The assessment is the process of observing a sample of students' behavior and then drawing inferences about the student's knowledge and his abilities. Of course, there are many synonyms that exist for assessment, such as test, exam, etc. Now, the use of the word assessment instead of the test, let us say, because most of we call it as exams or tests. Instead, if we use the word assessment, this will promote a more positive connotation among the students in the classroom. It should be used in place of the terms which will actually indicate some possible failure and negative outcome, and may also cause some additional anxiety among the students, because as soon as the students see there's a test, they have that anxiety and there could be some negative outcomes out of it. Now the question is, why at all we have to assess the students? Now the thing is, in order to gather some evidence of the student learning, to inform the instruction, and of course to motivate the students and increase student achievement. Now, assessment is the process, as we have already said, the gathering and interpretation of evidence. So it provides the evidence to the instructor as well as the student as to how well the students have learned what we intend them to learn. What we want students to learn and be able to do should guide the choice and design of this assessment. So when we look at this particular slide, which gives 3 corners, one, what is the intended learning outcome, the other teaching and learning activities, and the other side is the assessment. If you can see, all the 3 are actually interlinked with each other. So assessment is an integral part of teaching and learning. And the purposeful assessment practices help the teachers and students understand where they have been, where they are, and where they might go next. And no one assessment can provide sufficient information to plan this teaching and learning activities. We need to use different types of assessments, which is part of our instruction, which will be useful for the student understanding and the progression. So as you can see, a balanced assessment system is an important component of the quality teaching and learning process, because if we look at the proper assessment, then automatically that will lead to a proper teaching and learning activities. And if proper teaching and learning activities go, that will automatically affect the learning outcomes of a student. So we see that assessment, which is in the interface between the curriculum, teaching and learning, it plays a very significant component in the classroom practice. Of course, some of the researchers have indicated that typically teachers spend between 1/3 or 1/2 of their class time engaged in one or the other type of assessment, or let's say the learning evaluation activity. However, research has also expressed their concern that the knowledge that teachers hold about the assessment matters has been limited, with scant attention paid to this area in teacher preparation programs. So as I have already mentioned, like in my last talk, I have touched upon 6 C's. But before to that, let me quickly touch upon the Bloom's taxonomy. Now we understand that Bloom's taxonomy is a convenient way to describe the degree to which we want our students to understand and use the concepts to demonstrate particular skill and to have their values, attitudes, and interests affected. It is critical that we determine the levels of the student expertise that we are expecting our students to achieve, because this will determine with the classroom which classroom assessment techniques are most appropriate for the course. So as it's defined, the students have to go from, we mentioned it as lots. The first three levels, which are remembering, understanding, and applying, are what are called as lower order thinking skills. And the students have to move towards the higher order thinking skills, which are the last three levels. So much of focus is on these activities where students have to move from lots to hearts. So how does faculty do this? How does a faculty modify his teaching methodologies? Means there are 6 C's which we have already discussed. So content, knowledge, communication, confidence. These are the 3 areas with which faculty is moving ahead nowadays. And of course, this is the lower order teaching skill. But if you want the student to move to the higher order teaching, higher order thinking skills, the faculty has to move from lower order teaching to higher order teaching skills, which can happen only when faculty starts collaborating with other departments and start some innovative teaching methodologies, some kind of creativity in his teaching methods also. But to our surprise, we see that whether it is teaching or the learning, it is linked with the assessment. So again, assessment has got some 4 levels in the triangle, where we see that the lower 2 levels are where we start doing our assessments, and nowadays it is at the lower level. And as I said, if one has to move from lots to hearts, even our assessments have to move to the higher order assessment levels. So what are the traditional assessments and how are they taken by the students? Traditionally, it is believed that assessment, whether it's in the form of a quiz, final examinations, or pop-up tests, which we think is the best way to motivate the students, has become the greatest intimidator to the students. Thus, the anxiety arose from the students when the word assessment is said or when assessments are given to the students. Generally, students take these tests or exams as a competition with teaching than a tool to improve the teaching things. Now, students develop an anxiety, of course, a negative attitude also towards the testing methods because of the constant ranking and the comparison we make with respect to others, which ultimately suffers their achievements. Now, as I said, because of this constant ranking and intimidation, students, they develop a fear of failure, uncertainty in the decisions. They will be unwilling to take some risks, learned helplessness, and looking down on oneself and abilities. So traditionally they say that I study so much before the exam, I pass it, but when it comes to execution, I forget what I have learned. So what one has to do if we have to tackle this issue? So though the most common form of classroom assessments used in the introductory college courses could be higher courses also, are multiple choice tests, these might to some extent assess the knowledge and comprehension levels, which we know are the lower order thinking skills. Now this type of assessment often falls short when we want to assess our students' knowledge at the higher levels, which are synthesis and evaluation levels. So whenever we are actually planning some assessment, we need to align these assessments with the objectives. Are we assessing what we are teaching? That is what we want the students to learn? This should be the first question when we design our assessment. So when objectives and assessments are misaligned, as I have said, many students will focus their efforts on activities that will lead to good grades on assessments, rather than focusing their efforts on learning. And this is what is happening in today's assessment techniques, because we have not aligned our assessments with the objectives. Yes, in the outcome-based education, we have come a way of designing or creating the objectives of our lessons. But now the next step is we need to align these objectives with the assessments, or let us say the assessments have to be aligned with the objectives. So we need to use different kinds of activities so that the students have multiple ways to practice and demonstrate their knowledge and the skills, just not paper pencil kind of assessment. So now this particular slide, which is Miller's pyramid, clearly indicates the lower two levels. The student knows and the student knows how. And these can be assessed with a written or oral or computer based assessment, which, as I said, we are following in today's thing. We have to now grow, wherein we have to see how the student, he has to show us how he has understood this, and he also has to do something to demonstrate that he has understood. So it is something like performance based or hands-on kind of assessment that we have to use. Because most of the commonly used assignments are for assigning grades, which are not providing us with the feedback for determining whether the students have attained the course goals or not. So what we have to do if we have to tackle such situations, we have to ask ourselves what we want them to learn and how will we know that they have learned it. So it's something like backward designing. So backward designing here means we should not actually plan our lessons. First, we must begin with assessment. Then as per the assessment, we should design the activity. How am I going to teach this particular lesson? What are the areas that which I'm going to target upon? That should be the case, which is what I call it as a backward design. So work backward to activities. So you may plan some project-based learning, or you may plan some kind of activities in the class. All these things should actually depend on the assessment method that you have used. So now today's students need to know not only the basic reading and arithmetic skills. We understand the 21st century skills. They will have to face a world that is continuously changing. So they must be able to think critically, they must be able to analyze, and they must be able to make some inferences. Now, changes in the skill base and knowledge our students need require new learning goals also. These new learning goals change the relationship between assessment and the instruction. So teachers need to take an active role in making decisions about the purpose of assessment and the content that is being assessed. So educational assessment in the 21st century should be connecting theory and the practice. So well said, what all things we have understood, what assessment, how assessment has to be. Now what are the types of assessments that are available for us? So there are three types of assessments, as one can see. One called the diagnostic assessment, which is taken before the learning starts. Because I want to understand, if I'm trying to teach a student about, let's say, differential equations, I need to understand at what level the student is. Because it will help me in designing my course. Because if 70% of the students, they don't have the prerequisites of the course, then whatever I'm teaching will be of no use and it will not lead to a learning. Therefore, one has to have a diagnostic assessment. Then something which comes during learning is what is called as the formative assessment. It is also called as assessment for learning, which informs students and teachers actually. And the third one, which is actually the summative assessment, which is also called as assessment of learning, or Rather, we can say this is the final or the official assignment which will be evaluating the teachers, I mean to say the students' achievement. So assessment for learning, this occurs throughout the learning process. It is not a one-time thing that happens and there ends. In assessment for learning, teachers use assessment as an investigative tool to find out as much as they can about what the students know and can do, and what confusions or preconceptions or gaps they might have. The wide variety of information that teachers collect about the students' learning processes provides the basis for determining what they need to do next to move student learning forward. It provides the basis for providing descriptive feedback for students and deciding on groupings. Because if you want to have some group activity done, then I need to know who are the students who can be grouped and the activity can take place perfectly. When it comes to assessment of learning, which is also called the summative assessment, this refers to all strategies which is designed to confirm, you must remember the confirm, what students know, demonstrate whether or not they have met the curriculum outcomes or the goals of their individualized programs, or to certify the proficiency and make some decisions about students' future programs or the placements. It is basically designed to provide evidence of achievements to parents or other educators, or let's say to outside groups, something like the employers or the educational institutions when they are going for the higher education. We must understand that assessment of learning is assessment that becomes public and results in statements or symbols about how well students have learned, and it often contributes to pivotal decisions that will be affecting the students' futures. So we must be careful at the summative assessment level also, and we must be very careful at the formative assessment level also. If one has to understand, let's look at some analogy, the garden analogy. Now let us think our students as plants. So what is summative and what is formative assessment? Now, in case of summative assessment, which is at the end, summative assessment of the plants is the process of simply measuring them. That means once I sow, every 7 days or every quarterly I go and measure what is the growth of the plant. Now it might be interesting to compare and analyze measurements. I can have two varieties of plants seeded and can see what is happening to variety 1 seeds and what is happening to variety 2 seeds after, let's say, 1 week's time. You can just have a kind of analysis, compare and analyze that variety 1 seed has grown by 1 centimeter, variety 2 seed has grown by 2 centimeters in a week's time. These do not affect the growth of the plants. So when you are analyzing, definitely whatever growth the plants have to do, they will do. It will not be affected. Whereas formative assessment, on the other hand, is equivalent of feeding and watering the plants appropriate to their needs, which directly affects their growth. That means after I seed, I see after every 3 days what is happening to it. Is sufficient sunlight provided to it? Is it drying up? So do I need to water the plant more, or do I need to put some manure or some kind of things that I need to provide which is affecting their growth? So this is what is actually a formative assessment does to the students, right? So if we wish to maximize students' achievements, we must pay far greater attention to the improvement of classroom assessment, which I call it as formative assessment. Of course, both assessments, assessment of learning and assessment for learning, is important. But assessment of learning is in place and assessment for learning is not taking place in, I should say, in the Indian context. So again, let me quickly talk on what formative assessment is and what formative assessment is not, because now everybody will start planning that I must have some kind of assessments in between my classes, in between my topics. So one has to understand that The formative assessment is not an instrument or it's not an event, which means once I do this, it's over. And it is of course not used for grading. We should not use any grades and tell the students that see, you have scored this much and you are graded to be in A grade, B grade or C grade. It should never be used for grading. And it is not used as a punishment for the students if they misbehave. We have to keep these things in mind when we are planning these formative assessments. Rather, what we should look at formative assessment to be as, it's a collection of practices that all will lead to student learning improvement only. It is a tool for the teachers to determine what they need to do to move the learner forward. Because once I understand that students have completely misunderstood a topic and they are giving a wrong option to the quiz that I have posed, then I should immediately relook and then again I have to revise that lesson, or one more time I have to teach the concept, because the students have given, majority of the students have a gap in their understanding. And it is a technique to help the students optimize their learning. So it is the assessment that is used for ongoing improvement while teaching and learning is occurring. You can ask like, what are formative assessment ideas? You can think about something like 1-minute paper or 3-minute conference, performance evaluations or exit card, portfolios, or some kind of small simulations or some kind of small interviews, etc., which will actually tell us whether the students are going in a proper direction or not. So again, we have known what is summative assessment. It is the assessment of learning, which generally happens at the end of the semester, sometimes at end of unit also, because in most of the Indian context we have exams, quarterly, half yearly and end exams, which at engineering level we call them as midterm examination, which takes after 2 units, and midterm 2 examination, which takes place after 2 more units, and finally there is a final examination. So this is some of what they have or have not learned. Now, summative assessment methods are the most traditional way of evaluating students' work, as I have already said. But it is not that summative assessments are not good. Of course, good summative assessments, tests, and other graded evaluations must be demonstrably reliable, they must be valid and free of bias, as mentioned by the authors Angelo and Cross in 1993 itself. So let's quickly look at the differences between the formative and summative assessments. Now, formative assessment occurs during the learning activity, whereas a summative assessment occurs at the end of the learning activity. Now, formative assessment aims to monitor the student's progress in the learning, whereas the summative assessment aims to evaluate the student learning, which is at the end. Similarly, formative assessment provides students with feedback, whereas summative assessment will only yield a specific score or a result, where student cannot go back and modify things. Whereas in formative assessments, what happens is, students, before he takes up the summative test or the final examination, he can actually improve upon. He can see, he can check like what mistake he has done, and the same mistake will not be repeated there. Whereas after final examinations, as I have said, it's only the final score. It's only the 60 or 65% of score which he cannot modify. And the formative assessments can occur several times. You can take it as for every topic that you teach, you can have a small formative assessment for every small topic that you cover. Whereas, of course, we understand summative assessments, they take few times over the course of the academic year. Now, formative assessments, they can use a wide range of question formats. As I said, multiple choice questions, match the following questions, or variety of question formats. Whereas in case of summative assessments, limited number of question formats will be used. Okay, Whatever the assessment is, as we understand, whether it is the diagnostic assessment or the formative assessment or the summative assessment, all are important and necessary in the development of any course. In fact, diagnostic assessment also helps in planning some prerequisite topics, as I have mentioned. Formative assessment is not a test nor an instrument, but rather an approach to teaching and learning that uses feedback as its centerpiece. Right? We understand that. So one has to be very careful that whatever type of assessment, they all will be linked to the learning process. Now, quality evaluation, which we call it as assessment. So quality assessments. Now tests should be designed so that the underlying concepts can be taught and learned rather than depending mostly on test taking skills or reflecting students out of college experiences. Now to support instruction, they should also offer good models for teaching and learning and insights into how students think as well as what they know. So assessments should accurately evaluate students' abilities, appropriately assess the knowledge and skills they intend to measure. So as we can see, we should have a balance. We should actually set a balance between the evaluation methods that we are using and the type of questions that are framed. Because if both are balanced, then only the quality will be coming in evaluation process. So we need to strike a balance in the method that I'm going to use and the type of questions that we are going to have in these kind of assessment techniques. So based on the changing demands of today's workforce, advances in other nations, we need to raise the standards and assessments that don't simply measure whether students can fill in a bubble on a test, but whether they possess these 21st century skills like problem solving and critical thinking, entrepreneurship, and then the creativity skills. So here comes the talk on what are the pillars of this quality assessment. I see that there are 4 pillars which will definitely, if targeted, will improve the quality of assessment. That's where I said RISE, where R stands for review, I for identifying, S for strengthening, and E for evaluating. So when it comes to review, what is that we have to review? As I have already mentioned, there's an interlink between the learning outcomes, the teaching and learning activities, and the assessments. So one has to clearly articulate what are the learning goals. And once the learning goals are clearly articulated, then they have to start designing the strategies. That is, what type of teaching methods have to be used. Of course, they will be depending on the assessment methods that we have chosen. So we have to see whether the learning goals have been articulated properly, whether the assessments have been framed, assessments have been thought of clearly, and then accordingly the teaching methods are going. If one doesn't review on this, you will see that I am teaching which is not matching the assessment. Okay, I have matched my assessment with the objective, but ultimately they are not matching with the learning objectives which the institute has framed. So all are in a line. And of course, once the assessment is done, what are we doing with this? So we should summarize the data after the assessment, then interpret something like what has happened to set of students who were given this kind of let's say a micro project kind of thing in their course. Did it really work out? Did it really improve the students' knowledge? Did it really help the students increase their critical thinking skills? That has to be actually summarized, and then accordingly we have to go further, whether to change the assessment methods or change the teaching strategies or what has to be done. So this review has to take place continuously Again, it's not a one-time process where we have reviewed it. Okay, for one batch it has worked, therefore thinking that this is once for all set a rule, this has to be implemented. No, for every batch this has to be reviewed, because batch to batch the students are going to differ and their learning styles are going to differ. So one has to keep on reviewing the things that they are using in their assessment strategies and their teaching methodologies. Well said and done. Once you have framed the assessment techniques, let us say people are using good formative, they don't understand what are formative assessments, but people started thinking in that direction. But of late it has been seen that many of the instructors or administrators and the scholars, they are still experiencing some kind of barriers in implementing these processes, that is formative, or let's say the kind of different assessment techniques. So one has to identify the barriers in implementing these things. We have identified, like with the research, it has come out that there are 3 barriers. Some people said that where is the time to do all these assessments? Because ultimately, the academic schedule is so framed that for first 1 month we have to start teaching and covering the syllabus. Immediately after that there will be a mid-examination, and after that we have to cover the next set of syllabus, then again mid-examination, and finally end up with the final exams. So where's the time? This is what the faculty think. But the answer to this is the formative assessments need not be kept in the academic calendar. It is as per the faculty's decision, it is as per the faculty's time management that they have to plan for these formative assessments. The second one is the resources. Time and resources both are highly interlinked, actually, I should say. Because when one says that we have time sufficient only to cover the syllabus, where's the time for doing this formative assessment? Then you can take the help of some, technology has come into our way. You can take some help of tools like Edmodo. You can talk about tools like MOOCs or Canvas, or some kind of tools where you can actually quickly air some quiz and give some critical questions where the students understanding or the misconception will be coming out. Because most of the time I do that. Once I teach the topic, I announce the test the next day, which the students can take from their home itself. They need not sit in the class, but they need to have a computer, they need to have some internet connectivity, and in 15 minutes they have to take the test, which will be giving us some kind of information that 70% of the students have answered it wrong. And next day immediately I come to the class and ask the students, how did you come to this conclusion? And the students say that, ma'am, this is what we felt. Then again I take some 10 minutes of time to review that this is not what was being asked, this is what you have to look at. So both these time and resources can be handled if one understands the purpose and how the assessment will affect. The third corner of this triangle is the scope, that is the understanding. Because most of the faculty members, they don't understand that assessment plays a major role in the learning process. It plays a major role in developing the teaching methodologies. Without any this thing, they start planning their activities, but they do not understand that are these things really going in the proper direction or not. So it is it is actually the higher level, or let's the senior faculty members or the higher managements, who have to give some kind of awareness among the faculty that there are assessment techniques, there is some formative assessment that has to happen in between, and this is how you have to consciously improve on your teaching things. So this one has to identify. Then one has to strengthen, because as we have been seeing, fine, it's very fine that I want to assess the student, for example, in a subject called computer language, computer programming and let's say computer programming using C language, let's say. So I want to know whether the student has really understood the concept of loops, let us say. Now the question is, if I ask the, if I do the assessment using a paper pencil model, is it going to really give me some kind of input whether the student has really understood the usage of loops? Definitely no. So what I have to do is, I have to blend and merge the content to mirror some real situations. So somehow I should give some real life situations to the student where he has to write a small 15 lines program which will use a loop concept to let's say identify how many number of students got less than 15 marks, or what is the time taken for our college bus to reach from X to Y place, and if there's a breakdown in between, what is the estimated time. Some kind of situations have to be created and given to the students so that they will implement on, and then we can really assess whether the student has understood or, because we need to consider some real jobs that the graduates are going to do after their graduation, and accordingly we need to give some kind of assessments. So review the topics or unit standards in the program. Now create a suite of engaging formative as well as summative activities. So it is not that always the activities should focus on formative things, because ultimately the summative assessment also takes place. So we need to engage the activities which will help him in both the cases, during the formative assessment as well as the summative assessment. This is where we call it as integrated assessments. This is how we have to strengthen ourselves. Now, one of it is like when we are creating some kind of, let's say, the assessments, how are we going to evaluate? We are going to evaluate, everyone has to understand the usage of some rubrics. Let us say I have given an assignment for the student. The student has to write a 200 words assignment on, let's say, the let's say recent trends in demonetization of money. Let's understand. So how do I assess this? Because assessment should be, as I said, it should be reliable, it should be valid and free of bias. Free of bias means whoever is going to evaluate my assignment should be giving me the marks without any bias, and also there should be a valid kind of assessment taking place. So this can be done if one creates some kind of rubrics. For example, if I have asked the students for an assignment which will carry 15 marks, then what I can do is, these 15 marks I can distribute into 3 categories. One category, like one portion, 5 marks can be for his understanding and identification of the issues or the main points that the topic is about. Then another 5 marks are for the supporting information, like he has to gather some supporting information for the claim that he is doing, and then 5 marks for the reasoning and the ideas and the details that he is going to give. So when I categorize these things, then the student will understand that, suppose he has not given supporting information. So when I give his rubrics back to the student, he'll understand that, okay, I have clearly given some key issues, but I have not given sufficient supporting information. Therefore, next time I have to ensure that I give some proper and sufficient information which is appropriate, accurate, and has been integrated effectively. Right? So this is how one has to, for any kind of assessment, one has to create some rubrics, which also gives some clarity to the faculty also. Like how many marks I have to award if the student has done a small mistake at the last final portion, final conclusion portion. The entire thing was correct, but concluding remarks are wrong. You need not penalize him by completely cutting away the marks because the conclusion was wrong. The introduction, the body of thing, everything is right. So you should not penalize a student for wrong conclusion. So this can be done if you can create some rubrics. Now, The fourth pillar, which is the evaluate pillar. So as I said, evaluation is just not about learning. Evaluation should also be about teaching. Again, for teaching also there can be a kind of formative evaluation as well as summative evaluation. And most of the time, summative evaluation is only taken care even for teaching. As students take the summative evaluation, even the faculty, they have their summative evaluation. Because external auditing will happen and how many students have passed in your subject. Teaching quality indicators, we call them as teaching quality indicators, where we see finally what is the percentage of result in your subject, what are the citations, and what are the award criteria. These are the things which are looked at when teaching is being evaluated. But I say that even the teaching has to be evaluated in a formative form, because when a faculty is using different varieties of assessment and teaching techniques, there should be some kind of peer evaluation done in order to develop and also review like what is happening and how that can be improvised. So faculty must take the student feedback also, whether the teaching methodology has really helped the student in understanding the concept, and also the method of assessing. Was it really time consuming, or it was very good and students have appreciated? All these kinds of things have to be taken, because this becomes the benchmark for a faculty, and that automatically reflects in the summative evaluation. So critical reflection on these things have to happen, and that is where I say we need to rise the pillars of the quality assessment. So in conclusion, I can say, for as long as assessment is viewed as something we do after teaching and learning are over, we will fail to greatly improve the student performance, regardless of how well or how poorly students are currently taught or motivated. Assessment should be deliberately designed to improve and educate student performance, not merely to audit as most tests currently do. The changing nature of work and society means that the premium in today's world is not merely on students acquiring information, but on their ability to analyze, to synthesize, and to apply what they have learned to address new problems, design solutions, collaborate effectively, and communicate persuasively. Now, this transformation will require an overhaul in curriculum and assessment systems to support deeper learning competencies. Therefore, one has to view assessment as a powerful tool for educational development or improvement rather. So, the test of a good teacher is not how many questions he can ask his pupils that they will answer readily, but how many questions he inspires them to ask him, which he finds it hard to answer, as said by Alice Wellington Robbins. So I say, let's rise the pillars of quality assessment. Thank you all for your patient listening, and if you have any queries, you can just start posing the questions.
Thank you, ma'am. And the audience can type in their questions through the chat box. How about giving marks for asking questions?
That's what, for asking questions means it is a sort of formative assessment, we can say. And as I have mentioned, these formative assessments should not be taken as a tool or for grading purposes. This should only be taken as the one which you have to understand that the student has not understood this concept. So let me review that.
Can you please give some specific examples for summative and formative assessment methods related to engineering?
As I was mentioning, for the case of summative assessment, it's the final examinations wherein we generally give them question based on, let's say, evaluate what is the case, then explain the construction and working, then give them some problems for where they have to analyze the systems. Whereas in case of formative ideas, what we can do is we can give them a 1-minute paper where quickly within 1 minute they have to answer some questions, very simple questions where there can be a concept which can be misunderstood by student. You can use some exit card kind of things, or you can use a 3-minute conference kind of assessment techniques. Sometimes extended experimental investigations is one such technique which is used in Queensland. This can be taken as some kind of formative assessment where you give the student some experiment. Then what you do is you extend this experimental investigation. So what the student is supposed to do is he has to provide the descriptions of the experiment, then show some evidence of the modifications that the student is trying to do, then provide evidence of let's say some primary or secondary data collection and selection. Then he has to execute the program, or let's say then he has to analyze the data, or he has to discuss the outcomes of the experiment. Now this helps us in understanding whether the student has really done the experiment, he has understood the idea behind doing this experiment. So we can call this as extended experimental investigations, which is most of the time used in Australia actually. Of course in Singapore, Hong Kong also these things are used.
A lot of teacher training is required to think of creative methods of assessment. Can you recommend some training programs?
Definitely, as the participant has mentioned, there has to be a lot of awareness in the teaching methodologies as well as the assessment techniques. One good platform is our IUC itself. It is giving us something called as IIEECP program, where it stands for IUC International Engineers Education Certification Program. This takes place in some kind of 6 modules, something like 3 weeks course where it's done using webinar mode only. So every week the participants have to attend this program. They have to do some kind of assignments. So the certification program starts from the basic things, like what is your teaching portfolio, like what as a teacher you want to become, where you are and where you want to. Then it talks about different teaching methodologies, different teaching styles, what kind of methods will help us in engineering curriculum, and how do we assess the students, what is the necessity of assessing the students, in which form actually. So I feel this is one good platform for anybody, because generally what I find is the time factor. As I mentioned, one of the corner is the time factor. Faculty say that where's the time for us to attend all these things, but here IUC is providing this online course, so one can attend this online course. This would be my suggestion to the people present over there.
In this region, faculty with heavy workload, how is it possible to implement RISE?
That's where I said, sir, see, when it comes to summative assessment, already the institution takes care of this summative assessment, because as such the institution has to conduct a final examination based on which only the certificates are issued to the students, pass or fail. What faculty have to concentrate is on the formative assessment, as I said, and as raised by the participant, how will we have, or from where do we have this time? So please take the help of technology. Like as I said, We have beautiful platforms called as Edmodo, which connects the teacher, student, and the parent. Or we have something called as Moodle platform, or we also have Canvas platform. Actually, what I do is I use this Edmodo platform. So I train the students how to use this Edmodo platform. So it hardly takes 15 minutes for us because the students have to register. And what I do is I post some of the material. They can be the animated versions of the concept that I want to make the student understand, or it can be a kind of PDF file which I will be uploading, and it will be broadcasted to the students. Then what I do is I give them some 1 day's time for them to come prepared for the class. Then I teach the topic in the class, which is 50 minutes of class. Then on the same day evening, what I do is I give them some 20 uh, multiple choice questions kind of thing, where I ensure that some 5 questions are, let's say, lower order questions, damn easy kind of questions where they simply can quickly can opt for the answer. 5 questions are some kind of thinking oriented questions, medium level questions, and some 10 questions will be critically answered kind of questions. They have to really see, like, unless they read the material that I have posted, they cannot answer these things. So using this particular technology, what we are able to see is, yes, students are learning and coming, and somehow we have included, because somewhere we have some 5 marks as assignment marks. So what we tell the students is, whatever scoring you get in this particular quiz, we will take an average and give these 5 marks as the case. So this has helped me in many situations, because when I was teaching some concept called interference kind of concept, I was astonished to see that student who was, I mean, as far as my gut feel says, the student was very intelligent, and so the student scored hardly 7 marks out of 30. So there were many students who scored very less. So when I questioned, they gave me the reasons, like, this is what we felt, this is what the reason why we had opted this and that. So I had to quickly review and take off those misconceptions. Then they felt, yes, we are now confident about answering these questions.
How do we find the right assessment methods?
Sir, again, as I said, it depends on what kind of teaching methodology you have used. For example, suppose if I used only chalk and talk method, wherein it's really not possible to cover a lot of things in the class. What I have done is, let us say we use some project-based learning. So we give some small project to the students. They have to execute in 4 weeks of time. Every week, 2 hours of time. We group the students. Actually, we group the students, 4 students forming a group, and these 4 students, every week 2 hours, they have to meet and then design some small project. Now the assessment that we have done is, in the 3rd week, what we do is we ask them to present their work, what they have understood about the particular project. So what we have done, we have assessed their communication skills, as well we have assessed their understanding about that particular subject. Then the 4th week, we have asked the students to execute and show to us. So we have created some rubrics there. So the rubrics had assessed their communication skills, their team building skills, their critical analysis that they have to do, and also the problem solving skills. So with this project based learning, we have targeted 3 things: problem solving skills, their communication skills, of course their critical thinking skills, and the team building skills. So as I said, the assessment was framed, and because of this assessment we had to go for the project based learning. So we did it reverse engineering. What I wanted to assess 4 things in one particular activity. I wanted to assess his communication, problem solving, and team based. So we have designed a project based learning there. Sometimes one may ask, what kind of assessment should I use to understand whether the student has got some misconception or a gap in the lesson that I have taught? what we can do is we can quickly give them a poll where quickly I have to pose a question where there should be 3 answers, out of which one is definitely going to confuse the student, a contradictory answer. Then as such we get the poll, which majority of the students will opt for the other answer. Then immediately we will come to an understanding that there is a concept which is going wrong into the mind of the student. So any other questions?
Yes, well, we use card technique to get student feedback in each class. Green understood, yellow partial, red not understood. Is that fine?
Yeah, that is absolutely fine, sir, because this is what formative assessment is all about. Only thing you need to be cautious about the kind of question that you are putting, and then how the students have understood it, and then you can proceed about. This is absolutely fine. This is one of the method actually.
Can such programs be held specifically for faculty of an institute in person?
Of course, you have to talk to your management. See, as like I have been attending this course IEEE program, the faculty themselves have to talk to their HODs, and HODs in turn they have to talk to the principals, because the top management understands the importance of improving the quality of education. So there are 3 things, as I have already mentioned: the learning objectives, which the institution has to take care, and the other corner of it is the teaching and learning activities, and the other thing is the assessment. So the 2 things are related to the faculty themselves, because teaching activities is done by the faculty and assessment is also done by the faculty. So faculty have to talk to their HODs, and they have to start looking at what kind of workshops can be held for awareness to be created, and the kind of programs that can be implemented in the classrooms.
Does the video of the class prepared by teaching faculty before the lectures useful for students in understanding the class as part of flipped classroom?
Yeah, like of the faculty himself or her, or any kind of video you mean to say?
Prepared by the faculty, I think.
Yeah, actually the flipped classroom concept is generally what happens is in the class we teach, and the assignments or the kind of problems that need to be solved based on the topic is given as homework. So flipped classroom talks about just flipping this, which is at home the student has to look at a video or read a PDF file or whatever, come prepared to the class, and in the class he has to start solving the problems where the faculty will guide him in solving the problems. So there is no teaching that has to be done during this flipped classroom. The students have to come completely prepared at home. So for that you need to give some kind of videos or some kind of PDF files, then understanding of the student, then he should be, I mean, you can group the students also, that's not an issue. You can group the students while solving the problems. So
that was the last question, ma'am. Thank you very much for answering all the questions.
I thank all the participants for their patient listening, and also I think the last slide which says that it is not that is most of you must have understood the varieties of assessments that are available and what one has to look at the formative assessments. Thank you one and all. I also thank the IUC for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.